Hi.
All right, we are just getting started. Thanks, Roland, for remembering to hit record. And this is the June 14th meeting of the Lifeboat Academy Finance and Legal Guild. And to get started, we take a moment to ground ourselves, both literally and metaphorically. We bring the land in. We remind ourselves that the land is actually, the land caused us to be, that we are sprung up from the land, and everything that we need to sustain ourselves, everything that we ever experience comes from the land and returns to the land. And so we take a moment to acknowledge that source of our connection, to acknowledge that we eat food and we poop out manure, and the earth takes that and heals it and regenerates it and creates new energy that comes back to us as fresh energy and food. And in doing so, we also acknowledge our debt of gratitude to the indigenous cultures of the world that have kept this knowledge alive. And we recognize our grateful, I don't want to use the word debt, our obligation of gratitude and care, um, recognizing the gifts that we have received and honoring them and returning them, doing what we can to care for the land and to care for all of our relations, human and more than human. And so with that, I invite us all just to take a nice deep breath in, feeling cool, energizing air entering your nostrils and your lungs. And then as you exhale, just let go of anything that no longer serves you, any heaviness, any tightness, any distractions. Just letting them flow from you like water off a duck's back, knowing that the earth receives them, regenerates them, and returns them to us as fresh energy. And when you are ready, come join us back in the circle. I see I'm here twice.
Good for you.
So we'll go around the circle and we'll give everyone a chance to do a quick check-in. And so, how are you doing today? And what's on your mind for our conversation today? What would be a useful use of the time? And the circle, as I see it, is Roland, Heather, Rebecca, and me. So, Roland, over to you.
We've had several days of a lot of lovely activity, doing things on and off the farm. And to be completely honest, today I would really like to just goof off. So that is how I am doing today. So over to Heather.
Okay, so I was a couple minutes late because I was taking the lid off my sourdough and it looks beautiful. Can I say? And it's lovely here, except tomorrow where I have a peop group of people coming for a wild tour, wild foods walk tour. It's going to be miserable.
Mm.
And and my grandson said, "Well, of course, with foragers, a little rain doesn't stop you." So we'll actually see whether that is true, but I'm getting my space ready for it. And I'm pretty thrilled that we have this amazing group of people who have revitalized and are part of Slow Food, called Wild Foods BC. And we have Andrea Carlson, who is probably our best chef in Vancouver. I'm biased, of course. I've known her for 30 years or so. She just got her Michelin star, and she's just a humble, beautiful person. And Laurie Snyder, who's our friend of the farm and Métis, and knows deep knowledge about wild plants. And anyway, I could go on because I'm very excited about it. And we're going to Terra Madre in Italy, and so we're just gearing ourselves up for gathering all the. And it's interesting. Just can I have one more sec? Okay, because it's irrelevant. Come from you. The gift you gave to me was this whole thing about being agnostic, which I had never thought of before in any other than religious terms. And it's kind of opened up for me this whole idea of of the nuances between what we call wild, like both the native indigenous to the land, but the settlers who brought plants that then got naturalized. And then the plants that are actually reseeding themselves in the gifts, and they've been somehow gone rogue. And our farm is absolutely full of these kinds of relationships that, the earth has had and welcomed in the plants. And part of the wild labyrinth the labyrinth that Susan and I are creating is that we decided when we went to do the path in the labyrinth and weed it out, that we were kind of like weeding out all the wild and indigenous plants. I felt like violent. And so she and I both independently agreed that this is where the wild things live.
Mm.
And if we're going to weave our way around it, we should have the kind of lightest footprint we can have. We can take out the bindweed, but all the things that have value to us we'll leave in. And so now it's just we're looking at it beginning to flourish. Anyway, I'm going to stop there, but kind of really relevant to the relationship to the land to me. And I think it's over to you, Becky.
Thank you. I am doing pretty well. I'm trying to sell my novel, trying to find an agent to help me sell my novel. So that's a little bit of an emotional roller coaster, but and sort of bringing me back to like, why didn't I publish in sociology, and like my whole life, looking at my whole life trajectory and working on the emotional, like being okay with appreciating where I am today. And my fun share is that here at co-housing, there's all kinds of offerings, and one of them was a mending workshop the other day, and I learned how to do a decorative patch.
Nice.
It's not really jeans, it's a knit fabric pair of pajamas with a hole in the butt, and so I'm enjoying my patching, my sewing, and keeping clothes out of the landfill kind of thing. And did you want us to also include goals for today in this round? We haven't done that yet, but
I think, yeah, go ahead.
so I was, crossing my eyes over Elliot's email and trying to understand it all, and looking forward to lovingly untangling all of these threads with you all today. Some of them, anyway.
We'll see.
Embroider with some of them. Maybe we can embroider with some of them once we get them untangled.
That's right.
Over to Ben.
I'm loving, because there's I was just thinking there's that technique where you actually kind of create a knot but it's part of the design, right? So we'll see what knots we can remove and what knots we can just that was part of the design.
Yes. I planned that.
It's a feature, not a bug. I am, it's interesting, Heather, you're talking about, I've been noticing our I'm going to call it turf. The plants, we have a mix of grasses and other, grassy, meadowy kinds of areas, but they're not just grass. And I don't really know enough. There's a lot of diversity in what's growing here. And it feels, my intuition, my onboard aesthetic says it looks really healthy. there's not any one area where there's one thing sort of dominating, and there's a lot of little things that are living with each other. And, we've got, and again, I don't have the, the sort of book knowledge part of it, but we've got wild strawberry everywhere. And somehow that feels to me like a sign of ultimate health. There's just something about that. There's just these little wild strawberry plants all over the place. And this nice mix of, there's yellow vetch and purple vetch, and then there's grasses and sedges, but it just looks really right to me, and so yeah, that's been part of the kind of like, well, what happens if we just, and it's the same sort of thing. It's a level of care. It's like, we will take care of removing the things that are going to be a threat or a harm. But otherwise, what's it want to do? And so that part's really cool. And I think it's also leaning into I kind of too have I want to goof off today. And but I think it's also because we've been playing outside more. I'm just getting more and more of a sense of like, that's actually how I should be spending my time. And this is what I do to get to the point where I can spend my time doing that. So it's like, let's get this done.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that the first, I mean, the one item on the agenda is really going through the feedback so far, the conversations that we've started already around all these legal form questions. Just to, and I'm going to propose, because I've been thinking about it a lot. I've been kind of coming back to it, but I haven't landed on anything for myself. Like I still feel like I am trying to sort through things. So I would like to propose a sort of gathering considerations approach, where we just kind of go through and what's on your mind. Where are we starting from in terms of, what questions do you have? What thoughts have you had? And that we generally, when we do gathering considerations, we try to keep it to one thought per, and then multiple rounds. And then that allows it to kind of build up. So I'm going to propose that that's one feature of our time together. And then quick, before we start that, are there other things that people want on the agenda? So any other items beyond talking about figuring out the knots of the legal structure stuff? Roland, over to you. Anything else you want to add to the agenda?
I don't have anything that I want to add to the agenda. Over to Heather.
You're muted.
I am muted, and I'm going to take my sourdough out, and no, there's nothing on the agenda that I can think of. Dad. But I can hear you, so it's good.
I think just an update about status of things with Stephanie and the land, and any other big updates that you might have.
Cool. I think we can cover the updates quickly, because I don't think we have any. I have a scheduled meeting with Brad Smith this afternoon, so that we finally, it hasn't happened yet, but today we will be connecting again with the Resilient Communities Project. Steph had, my understanding was it's next week that we're looking to meet, and we haven't set anything up, so we haven't heard back from Steph in any significant way. And likewise, we haven't heard from Joey, but we also didn't do any additional outreach to Joey. So I don't think we really have any updates. Everything is still kind of in limbo. Roland, is there anything that you'd like to add to updates?
Well, just that I often will send an individual reminder before a meeting, and I haven't with Steph because I figure to just, if she wants to join us, she can until we actually have the conversation. I mean, and she's indicated that she's still interested in working with us, and at the same time, it's not really up to me to, anyway, blah, 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 blah. So I haven't contacted her, but she has been continuing to engage with our social media stuff off and on over the last few weeks. So she's still there, she's still liking stuff, and yeah, I sent another short little update to Joey about, meeting with the lawyers and stuff, that we're working through stuff, and thanking him for his help. But I haven't received a response, and that was this week that I sent another little message. That's all I would like to add.
I guess I will add that this is not specifically a finance and legal update, but we started our 6 conversations, and we had very good attendance and a very good conversation, and with new folk. So some familiar faces, some sort of allies from other, like some community justice folks from Southern Gulf Islands came, and a couple new people. Well, one new person that is a connection through Ronnie. And in terms of our sign up list, we have a full sign up of people who are interested, and they represent, sort of an interesting mix of folk. So just that's kind of the other focus of what's going on right now. Okay, so I think, any questions on the updates, either Heather or Becca? All right, cool. So let's dive in, and I'll share the screen, and I'll keep notes as we go through. So I'm going to propose that we start. The first round is kind of, well, no, I'm going to leave it completely open. You can share, are there some questions that are on your mind? Is there a concept that you're excited about, or whatever it might be? Let's just kind of get it. Where are we starting from? Where are we now in terms of the legal structure stuff? And always free to pass. And we'll just kind of, like I said, let's try to keep it, I'm saying this for myself as well, keep it light, and then we'll do multiple rounds, and we'll see what can build up from that. So Roland, over to you. What are some considerations around legal structure? Where is you at?
I've been thinking about our last meeting where we were talking about trying to keep things simple around the legal structure, and looking for ways of integrating the more complex stuff elsewhere in the makeup of the Lifeboat Academy. And that is something that continues to be attractive to me. So I guess and that also means that, what does that mean to keep it simple? So it is, what are the basic parts that we need to have, and that those parts are where
Are you frozen? Oh, I think he's frozen.
where's the overlap. So over to Heather.
And you're muted, Heather.
I was thinking about that this week because there was a grant application that came up that I thought, oh my God, I could work with Lifeboat Academy on that, but we're not a legal entity yet. And I agree with Roland. Most of us have a long history of setting up the Constitution to be fairly general. And then all the rules that come in it are where we are more specific. So as long as the Constitution carries with it the, you know, the foundation, you know, that can't be eroded, we have to have confidence that we have enough flexibility within the group to operate on a sociocratic way, to do consent-based decision-making, and to have some confidence somebody's not going to take us over in the future. So for me, there's an urgency that let's just, you know, shit or get off the pot, as my mother-in-law says all the time. You know, do it. And over to, yeah, Becca.
I think I'm feeling yeah, some anxiety about this whole thing, and like I think I get more anxious when we're talking about a corporation and shareholders, because I don't understand those as well. Although I don't really understand cooperatives either. I understand nonprofits in the US, and I don't understand Canadian structures at all. But like, I think it feels to me like it might be worth considering a structure that the people who are going to be working with it most are most familiar with, in the keep it simple direction. Like, you know, how do we, there's this sort of grass is greener on the other side of the fence problem too. It's like, okay, we know the limitations of something that we know well, but we might be completely ignorant about the limitations of something that we think is better. And so I'm not presuming that that means this should be a nonprofit organization because that's what I'm most comfortable with, but I think a similar feeling maybe might apply to what are you all most comfortable with and knowledgeable about, and it might be worth considering if we're gonna just make a decision of, you know, like where to start and then adjust as needed. Yeah, over to Ben.
Yeah, I've been trying to think about, I started by I like visuals. They help me organize. And so there were the visuals around, I looked up one on the ESOP, the employee, whatever that stands for, stock ownership plan. The ESOP and the Oregon thing and the multiple organizations. And I'm trying to figure out where there would be value in at a basic level. I think we could set up I'm totally fine. I'm not committed. I haven't been committed from the very beginning on the whole B Corp thing. The aspect of the B Corp that I really liked was just being able to write your provisions into the social values into your articles of incorporation, like having that like be there and upfront. And we can do that with any form. It's just how it's construed is slightly different. And I think, well, and the questions that I've had around so I'm fine with it being a co-op. The questions always come back to what's the advantage. It seems like the basic trade-off is the move towards nonprofit and then beyond nonprofit to charity. you get more requirements placed on you, and there are some advantages, and it's just a question of trade-off for me. You know, is there an advantage in, and like, especially if we can't offer tax receipts to people buying property, which it sounds like that wouldn't, even if we went the sort of charitable route, we still couldn't do that. And we would have all sorts of restrictions on what we could do. So it makes me feel like I just haven't been, but then there's the option of the two organizations. I'm sorry, I said one idea and I'm bouncing around, and in part I'm bouncing around because I keep having this, like, this connects to this, connects to this, back to that. And so there's, in my mind, there's the connection, but there's, at a simple level, I think what we're trying to do is create a legal commons where people who own the commons, who, you know, who are working the commons, own the commons. And that's all we're trying to do. And that makes sense as a co-op. And that seems pretty straightforward to me. Where it gets complicated is, does it make sense to have a separate entity that owns the land? And if so, what's the advantage in that? Why would we want a separate entity to own the land? And what makes it worth having that kind of tiered structure? And the one thing that seems like it would make it really advantageous for somebody else to own the land is if there were multiple properties associated, right? It only kind of makes sense if there's some sort of economies of scale where, you know, it's a mutual aid society of multiple lifeboats. And that might be something in the future that we want. But anyhow, I think that's the big question for me, is I'm still trying to figure out where is the advantage of having the land owned by someone else than the entity that operates it. So I still scratch my head on that. And I feel like I muddied things more than anyhow, it's considerations there. That's my consideration. Over to you, Roland.
It is considerations, yeah. And I'm agreeing. I don't know if I got earlier from someone's comment, I got the impression of part of the discussion is where to start. And where to start implies space for evolution. And I think that's a good question. I don't know, but I'm attracted to the question. I am attracted to exploring the ideas around nested organizations, like because we have talked about, or I think we've talked about a not-for-profit owning the land and then leasing the land to the co-op or the whatever, and etc. That seems to make sense to me to meet the requirements of the current system that I mentioned before, and still maintaining the integrity of the project, at least as a starting place. And yeah, so over to Heather.
Yeah, for me, it all rests on how much the land costs. I mean, I think that if it were less money, we would be able to do this really, really easily. We'd have we would be nimble, we would be flexible, we could, you know, structure something, but whatever it is, how do we get that money to pay for the land? So, I mean, just for information, I don't know if you know, but CRA there's been a major shift in CRA, and that is now foundations and charities can actually contract. They've always been able to contract. They don't no longer have to direct and control a project, which is a change that we've been looking for years. It means the foundation can work directly with non-eligible donees, is what the language is. which for us in Foodlands just really like means we can work with Vancouver Foundation, with anybody. So like the layers and the connections and everything else have loosened up a tiny bit. The other thing that we are doing in Foodlands is working very closely with the National Farmers Union, who are looking to hold land in trust. And so again, it's like, is there with us, the National Farmers Union is a very like-minded, aligned kind of organization. I've had a really I've spent quite a bit of time now with Annette, who's there on their board, and I just feel really confident. You know, they, as a foundation, they are charitable. All foundations are. I think there are ways to go ahead. I think, however, I'd like to see us be unstuck. Like, to be confident that whatever way we go, we can change as we go. We can become a charity ourselves. We can find an aligned charity that we could pass the land on to, and then we would just manage the Lifeboat Academy, or steward it, as we often say now these days. So it's like, I don't know because there's always going to be possibilities. You know, we can't project what the future is going to hold. So how do we buy the land is the thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
How do we raise that kind of money? Yeah. Anyway, I think that's me for now. And then it's over to Becca.
I think I have questions about what you just said, Heather. It's very intriguing and hopeful. And I think my question is, if we're looking at if we wanted to try to take advantage of the change in the CRA and the National Farmers Union, what structure would we need? Would that help us buy the land? Would those things help us buy the land? And if so, what structure would we need in order to take advantage of those possibilities?
I'm going to honor the go around and come back to that.
And I'm gonna put my headphones in so I can go grab something from the other room and still hear you while passing it to Ben.
All right. Yeah, this is the question, right? How can we purchase the land? And so I hope this is useful, and because I think purchasing the structure that we need is the one that would, how do I want to say this? Part of what we're working on is transition economics. And so there is where we are now and where we want to be. And my vision of where we want to be is that people have permanent access to their fair share. And that, and how do we legally structure that? So there's going to be, broadly oversimplifying, there are going to be three classes of people in the world. There are going to be people who currently have access to more than their fair share. There are going to be people who have access and can convert, basically more or less have access to about their fair share, and are willing to work that with others, add it to the commons. And there are going to be people who don't have access to, can't afford their fair share. So part of the challenge is that in the transition, I believe I would like, as a person who doesn't have access to my fair share, I would like a way of gaining permanent access to my fair share through the process. So that means something like a stock option. you know, some way that I can put effort and labor into it, and out of it, I can get permanent tenure. So I think that's part of the challenge is if everyone could just show up and say, you know, I've got my money from my part of the share, then we just have shares and everyone buys a share and we're all in it. The challenge is that we need some people to put up money that initially that gets paid back, and some people that have a sweat equity pathway through it. And I think that's where it gets more challenging, is to figure out how that happens. So it's not, there's a little, I think a little bit, we have to think in two time frames. So there's where we want to end up, and then there's where we are now. And so bridging those, you know, bridging from where we are now to where we want, that's, I think, what makes it challenging to figure out the legal structure, is that we have to kind of think about these two things at once. And yeah, I think that's, I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass over to Roland.
I think I'm still brooding over the where to start question. And I think, and this is, and you know, full disclosure, I'm finding this really interesting and I'm really engaged. And this is also really, 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 really new to me, even as a way of thinking. It's a new thing for me. And this might be, I just might need some debunking around this, but is it possible to start somewhere and transition into something else? Or how difficult is that? Or what could that even look like? Yeah. So, and I don't want to, I'm kind of feeling like I want to hear what Heather has to say about Becca's questions as well. And I realize I'm adding another question to the whole thing. So take that into consideration. Over to Heather.
And can
Okay.
I just need to do a bio break, and Roland, can you take notes while I'm away?
Okie dokie.
We can just pause. Go.
I will go, but don't pause on my account. Continue the conversation and I'll catch up. Oh, actually, I know what I'm going to do. Hang on. I'm very clever. I'm going to turn on captions. And then I will be caught up when I get back.
Ah,
And are you finished, Roland?
I am, yes.
Okay. So I just have to be reminded of all the questions I've been thinking as we go. Um, I had a number, the immediate thought I had was that I am very familiar with the cooperative structure, and also the community service cooperative structure. And I'm thinking that maybe it might be, even though I'm very resistant to it, it might be that we want to entertain the, what do you call it? The multiple shareholder approach to it. Not lots and lots of them, but maybe the three layers that we're talking about, or that Ben has been talking about. And in that cooperative structure, there's the ability to have as many shares as we decide is going to be the maximum share. Often those shares are determined by what are we going, like often like 10 shares. Let's say it's 5,000 a share, 10,000 would be 50,000. That's the maximum that people can actually put into the cooperative, because they'd be vulnerable if there's no limit to one person. So that's one way of protecting oneself, and also those shares can be paid back. I mean, that's in the legal constitution of it. If they're asked to be paid back, they can be paid back. But if there's an understanding that we're going to be continuing to have transition those shares to somebody else, then that serves the original purpose that you had, was that you get people to have a lot of money up front, but then we're going to transition that to more people. in many of the co-ops we have a kind of like those people who in Low Runner dig in the dirt require more shares. Now those shares, they can have those shares with the idea that they will purchase it with their sweat equity, if that's the way that we want to do it. Like they already have them, but they need to purchase it. But one of the difficulties with in doing that in any sweat equity is there has to be some money somewhere. It has to translate into some sales or some money, which then could be put towards those shares in a real way. I think I'm wandering a bit and away from some of the questions that you had. The other thing too it occurs to me that we have some people on a fairly experienced high level who understand how to do these things. It's not so much constitutionally, because I think I have a good understanding of that, but financially. So there's two things. I don't think that it's so much a legal problem for us, it's a financial problem. So, like, how do we structure it so that we get the finances, so that the people who are asking for finances understand what we're asking for, understand how they're protected, understand how we are going to transition their money towards bringing in more shareholders so we have a stronger, more diverse, base, that it's not held with just a small group of people. One of those peoples is LV Belbianco, who is now with the BC Co-op Association, who was a co-op manager for Van City for many years. This would be a challenge to put towards LV to say, hey, what do we do in this case? And he would know who are the financial people within the cooperative sector that can say, hey, this is an interesting project. Let's chew on this. Let's figure out how to do this. The thing is, you can do this with B Corps and everything, but I don't have the connections with those. I don't understand that, So for me, it's just a matter of, okay, if we don't go the cooperative way, okay, then I'll bring the people in that I know would be interested in and saying how we need to do this. So for me, no matter which way we go, we need to be really, really clear and simple about what we want to do currently, how and what our aspirations are, and then, okay, what is the path towards that? So multi-stake shareholders is one way to do that. And being really clear what the transition looks like. And I think you've done that, Ben. I think there's lots of language to that. It's just maybe not that I'm not so clear about that. I have to revisit that. We have to simplify that and language it so that it's easily transferred to somebody, without the whole history and background. Have I touched on all of the questions that were asked? What was
could
it?
you yeah, so I think I'm still not clear on with the CRA and the National Farmers Union.
Oh, okay.
Are those things that would work if this is a cooperative, or does it need to be a non-profit in order to take advantage of those?
Yeah, and nonprofit and cooperatives are the same thing. Legally here, they have a lot of the same. No, I mean, we went to a lawyer to say which would be better for us, and the lawyer said, you choose. They're really not that different, except we're choosing a cooperative because we're a part of a global cooperative movement, because it's the third sector, in terms of economics. It's because we feel that being a member of a cooperative is maybe a little stronger commitment than being a member of a society. But they really, in BC anyway, they're really viewed the same way.
Okay. And then in terms of,
can I just say, except for one thing, because this might be confusing to you, the choices between being a for-profit cooperative and a not-for-profit cooperative. And we're going for the not-for-profit so that when the land gets sold, it doesn't get split between all the shareholders, is one of the biggest things. And so
We,
that,
Foodlands is doing that, or
oh yeah, like, no, yeah.
who's we in that sentence?
Well, we is whoever owns the land. It's kind of like, you probably in the States, you have a lot of this. Wealthy people form co-ops. I mean, it's not for the social benefit, it's for their own personal benefit. And they are a for-profit co-op. And in all of the co-ops that are consumer co-ops are for-profit.
Mhm.
So you see, and the shareholders get to say the disbursement of the surplus. And if you are a land for-profit co-op, you're into it with your shareholders because you expect the land to increase in value. You'll sell it at some point and you'll all benefit. It's kind of collective ownership. It doesn't have anything to do with community benefit. Or, there isn't usually an intention for it to not be sold.
Mhm.
Right? So like
Right.
when you think co-ops, that's the division between, you can structure it either way. And we are obviously going to structure it, if we did here in BC, a community service co-op, because the difference also between a community service co-op and a not-for-profit co-op is that in a not-for-profit co-op, usually the members benefit. In a community service co-op, the community benefits and the members take responsibility for that benefit, for making sure the community benefits. And our long-term, of course, aspirations is we want however we define community to benefit from the responsibility we're taking on as shareholders. And that responsibility, of course, includes both the responsibility and the privilege we have for that, whether that's a long-term lease to farm the land or a place to come and stay and visit or whatever that looks like. I think I've said enough. I think I'm on a soapbox.
No, this is helpful to kind of break the circle a little bit and just like ask you questions because you know so much about this area that I don't know much about. And I'm still thinking about the question that Ben raised about how to transition the have-nots into the have a fair share. And which model, like, does when you talked about the farmers union holding land in trust, that sounded to me like a model where the have-nots wouldn't end up with equity because the land is in trust for the sake of in perpetuity for farming, which is not the same as Ben and Roland being able to retire, and not be in the poorhouse.
Okay, so I think that if I can interject on that, is that would go back to the model that Ben had. Is that somebody who is capable of holding the land would hold the land. And in holding the land, they would have I don't know what it would, an agreement with, say, the cooperative to manage the land in the way that they chose to do. And that would be a negotiated contract between the two. In terms of talking to the National Farmers Union, they have no interest at all in managing it. That would not be their role. So like Ben, you're quite right. It's like there's these two functions. Like we've always said, there's the people who actually hold the land, and then there's the people who actually are on the land and steward it, manage it, work it, live it, whatever it is. And really, really important not to give that right away to whatever mechanism you have of holding the land. I'm calling it holding, owning, whatever. And if there's ways that we in the future, like my aspirations in the future, is that we'd have these commons with a common understanding and value-based understanding that this land is not for sale. And the people who are taking responsibility for it are like it's a sacred trust in a way. And they benefit,
Mhm.
you know. So I am not pushing the National Farmers Union at all. I'm just giving it for information that right now, the way they'd love to see it is that Foodlands is responsible for making sure that that land is properly cared for. And all the resources that people need in order to be able to do that. And that Foodlands, because we're a network of people, you know, we can pass that on or share it or collaborate or do whatever we want to do with those pieces. So the National Farmers Union is looking at the possibility of taking a and we would not in Lifeboat be probably, we're not far enough along, but possibility of kind of like a pilot study, like an example of doing this. And we've got some that are simpler that could, you know, that could benefit from working it out. So I think the choice just still is that let's constitute ourselves. You know, I don't know.
But so do you have a
It's
sense of which structure
well,
would,
you already know that I'm not like that I'm counting on other people to take the B Corp structure and do it if that seems to be the best one, because I don't have the knowledge about that. I'm not at all resistant to it. It's just you've got the knowledge in me about the community service cooperative. And maybe somebody else in this core group, you know, like if we could bring someone else in who was really, you know, champion that. Who knew what we wanted to do, that would be, I'd love that. And you know, maybe that is the next step, is that we haven't ruled it out, so let's jump in and let's take those two models and jump in and really work it. I think that's enough for me, I think.
yeah, if we're going back to circle,
Okay,
and I'm
you
next,
and-
I'm next, then I pass to Ben.
Permission to ramble?
Boy, I didn't even give myself permission for that. Or ask for it.
Well, I mean, and this is where I think, first of all, I think the Lifeboat Academy is far enough along that we can be a pilot. And so a thought I had just recently, it's kind of building on, are you willing to convert privilege into connection? And so one factor that we haven't talked about is what Roland and I call the golem trust aspect of this, which is it's not just that one property gets set aside. We figure out some generous donors who out of the goodness of their heart are willing to make the land available to other people, and those people are set. We actually want it to be an economic generator where it is, you know, you were saying, Heather, that for the sweat equity thing, there has to be income, right? You know, there has to be some involvement in the economy. And but ultimately, how do the assets, how does the land base actually leverage making more land available for more people who want to do this? So one of the things I was thinking about, we were talking before about investor is such a loaded word, and it makes people think about the resale value of the property, right? You know, but what if we were talking about an endowment? And, you know, the thing with an endowment is that there is an expectation that the endowment will generate more good in the world, right? You don't just pay down you don't spend down the endowment, you use the endowment to grow the work of the philanthropy. So so part of the question is, how can we set this up in a way that if the Lifeboat Academy, if Spalding Valley Farm, let's put it that way, if Spalding Valley Farm is successful, that it actually creates opportunities for another farm to be put into the commons where that sacred trust happens, right? Where there's more land managed. And if people want to, if people are generous and they want to contribute, that's fine. But how can we make it part of the economic engine that, it's pulling more land into the commons. It's taking land out of the commodification system, the real estate market, and pulling it into the commons. And riffing on the idea that you're trading in privilege for connection. In my mind, I'm trying to go back to a thought experiment about if we could wave a wand and redistribute resources, and we say it doesn't make any sense that some people have access to natural resources, to the God-given elements of the earth that no one created, everyone should have equal and fair access to that. People would still have to work, right? Because the land itself is not going to generate anything. It's only the land plus the labor that produces sustenance.
Mhm.
And if everyone had access to their land, and we'll just for the moment say, like, people who are able-bodied and everyone works to provide for themselves plus a little extra for those who can't, for whatever reason. But, basically we would all have to work a certain amount to earn our keep. And then there would be hopefully time left over that wouldn't be, that wouldn't be all of your waking hours just to keep yourself alive. And that the gift economy happens. So in my mind, I'm trying to generate this new economics. Everyone has access to the resources with an obligation to care for those resources to provide for our sustenance. So in a radically individualistic model, everyone gets their footprint and has to work their footprint, and then they get the fruits of their labor. And then, but there are going to be some people who don't want to or can't work that land, just choose not to, and other people who are going to be willing to work more than their one footprint. So what if we paired them up? And this is the kind of an elaboration of the insurance policy. So somebody who has the means of being able to buy a footprint, but doesn't have the time, availability, or interest in working the footprint, pairs with another person who doesn't have the means to, to acquire a footprint, but has the ability to work more than one. So, Becca, you want an insurance policy and I need land. So actually you purchase 2 shares, 2 footprints, and I work both of them. And over time, I am building your lifeboat. You're making the land available to me. And then in exchange for that, I get my footprint and you keep your footprint. Like you start with 2 and you end up with 1, but you end up with 1 that has been tended and cared for. So your insurance policy, it costs you 2 footprints, but it doesn't cost you any work. And my footprint costs me the work of 2, but no cash, like no cash out of pocket to start. So that kind of pairing, I think, sort of, and then I think, anyhow, I think that's the
jump in with a question?
Yeah.
And it's maybe a question for Heather. Is that a multi-stakeholder cooperative? Is that something that could be supported by that structure?
Yeah, I think when I respond to you, I think yes, that could work, but I'm struggling too as well as how to put that into a structure.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like outside the structure in a way. I mean, I think you can have a structure, like a clear ownership structure. I mean, I think that people wanting, like if you want an insurance policy, it means that you want to put your money in, but you want to be assured that you get what out of it, what you've owed, or what you've agreed to, what your agreement is. And maybe your agreement is that somebody will work it for you in exchange for having, you know, I like the idea of footprint. I think that I don't think we've been talking a lot about that, and I think that that's kind of something which is more publicly, not publicly, but more understood. But every time, Ben, you pull us away from, you're asking the structure to answer all the values that you have and all the possibilities of how you program it. And I think you need to be assured you can go that route with whatever structure we decide, that we want to pull. When you
Well,
talk about,
and that's I think that's what I'm trying to think about is how that the share exchanges happen. And
and I don't know that it needs to be so, I don't know that we need to articulate it. I guess we do. I need to think a bit more about that. It's like when you talk endowment, I understand endowment really well. Just for your information, we have a community farms endowment with Van City Community Foundation. And they basically give the tax receipt to people who donate it, right? Money to them. That endowment is held. The interest in that endowment is then granted out to different community farms. And so we've been doing this for a kind of a number of years. The idea with that endowment, community farms endowment, is that we would have built it, really built it so that we would have a lot more interest, and Van City kind of guarantees a certain amount of interest, even when the interest is low, kind of thing. So there are financial and legal mechanisms to actually have that. You could have your own foundation.
But no, but I think you're misunderstanding me because I'm thinking not a financial endowment, but the land as endowment. So rather than generating financial interest through a banking system, you're trying to generate financial profit through the use of the land.
I understand, except that the land you're going to have to buy anyway. If you
Right,
buy,
exactly. That's the whole thing though, is that who holds this is why for me it comes back to this legal question of does that make sense then that the land that would be the endowment land
Mhm,
would be held by a separate entity,
mhm.
and
That-
and the only question though is if that's the case, then so the reason why I bring up the footprints is that what's the equivalent if Becca and I are going to pair up and Becca's going to buy 2 footprints worth of land, I'm going to work both of them. And in the end, we're going to have our 2-person lifeboat, right? Now that land, instead of us owning it, right? That's really simple. If we want to own it together, we have
Yeah,
2 shares to start off with. And at one point I get to buy a share through sweat equity from Becca and we own it. It's simple. But how does that work if Becca buys 2 shares of the footprint and gives it to the National Farmers Union? Then how are we assured that we still have access to it and that we can work it the way that we want to work it? So that's why I'm bringing it up, is it's sort of like if the land is held by somebody else, how do we get some guarantee that we still have access to it?
and I think that relates more to the, let's say, the foundation, rather than say, well, I mean, National Farmers Union is a foundation, but they're not experienced at this. The foundations are all experienced at multiple layers of different agreements with the original donor and all that kind of thing. So it might be very appropriate to ask people in a foundation, like, for example, I think, I don't know what local foundation is associated with Bender. It
Probably
does
Victoria Foundation.
Victoria Foundation. So, not to be too diversionary, but this is what's happening with on the 24th of January, July, June we're in. On the 24th of June is the deadline for the foundations who are putting out grants for 3 years for the operations and the development of whatever organization you are constituted. So Foodlands is looking at it and thinking, oh, wow, we could get this in order to do the work with all of community farms. But it turns out you actually have to be place-based. You apply to the foundation that's in your area. So I still don't know how we can do this. I thought, okay, if we were well along the way with the Lifeboat Academy, we could have a 3-year plan on how we could actually organize ourselves, get the share capital together, do all the work that we need to do in the next 3 years. But it seems to me it's a little far off because we're not actually constituted yet. I don't think that they would, unless
if
Foodlands
we
did it.
wanted, if you know, I mean, here's the thing about the Constitution, that if we wanted to do a community services co-op, actually I've done this now 3 times. Three times I have incorporated.
Okay.
And each time I incorporated, it took 12 hours. You know, you use a template, and the standard, if you want the simple standard thing, you fill in the blanks and you can do it. And so if we were agreed that a community services co-op format was the right thing for what we were going to do, and we wanted to keep it bare minimum, we wouldn't even need a lawyer. We could actually just file it and it would be done. The reason you bring in a lawyer is to make sure that you're not getting tripped up, right? You know, and likewise, if we weren't going to bring in a lawyer, like the stuff that I've incorporated was bare bones. It said, you know, there are 100 shares, there's 1 class, there are 3 owners, and you know, that's it. So if it was a question of, you know, sort of being able to, if it really was just a question of filing, we could do that tomorrow. It's just a question of making sure that we're not filing the wrong thing that's going to shoot us in the foot further down the road. And it was one of the questions that we came up with earlier, is having an innovative structure, is that part of the project or not? And I think that, you know, maybe we've talked ourselves into not, you know, maybe trying to get everything working in the legal structure, or, you know, in some sort of legal structure that mimics the commons. Don't worry about that. You know, keep it as dead simple as possible, and you know, and worry about that later. So anyhow, I feel like I'm totally breaking circle, and I know Heather, you and I have been going back and forth, and Becca and Roland haven't, so I want to make space.
Yeah.
Let's go to Roland.
Well, okay, so thank you. I like where you ended, because that's where I was getting really confused. There's a lot of stuff going back and forth, and I kept coming back to, well, what do we need to do to incorporate? Like, what do we need to know? And I think that what you were just saying was kind of answering my question. You know, what do we need to know to be able to make the right decision and keep it bare bones simple? And what can we still do and incorporate elsewhere in the way that we're organized? You know, like can we have yeah. And this is where I get tripped up. It's like, well, what are the bylaws? And we have to file the bylaws, and the bylaws. Is this why we got the lawyers, or do we have the lawyers because we're trying to decide between co-op or B Corp or the not-for-profit, or co-op not-for-profit or for-profit? Like, so I'm just getting really tripped up on the difference between what are the sort of theoretical aspirational goals of the Lifeboat Academy, and what do we need now to be able to start. So yes. and honestly, I don't know. I'm having a hard time distinguishing between all of the different things that are being said and what relates to what. So over to Heather.
Yeah, it's about, I agree with you exactly where I'm at. And I think it's about like you, Ben, who are, I'm excited about how aspirational you are. And I don't know myself how you take that innovative aspiration and fit it into our government structures. They don't fit. So, I mean, you're doing something that is so outside the box, that any government regulations would recognize, that you need to be confident that whatever we choose to be, how we choose to be recognized legally or, policy wise, is not going to stop you from being as aspirational as you are. As we are collectively, because we're caught up in your I was gonna say fantasy, and I thought I don't want to say fantasy. You know what I mean? I think it's really up to you, like to just go inside yourself and say, you know how to incorporate something. What do you think? And you know that we're on board with that. What do you think about taking the people you know are going to be behind you in your aspiration and become the first cooperative members? And then from there you spin what it is we want to do, and don't think of yourself as a pilot, or think of ourselves as a pilot. Not that we have to create something that everyone else then can they can learn from it, but we can't be responsible for the future and all the other organizations that want to be on board, or else we'll never get off the ground, or we'll never sail. Not get off the ground. Yeah. And I think that when we come together for these planning sessions, that's what we want to focus on, is, okay, if we are this kind of structure or whatever it is, like, how are we going to build this lifeboat? How are we going to finance it? Anyway, over to Becca.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said for going with a cooperative structure, because Heather's with us and Heather knows how to do that and could bring a lot of other people and resources into it. I understand the problem of, if the land is held in trust, what then ensures that the people stewarding the land, that their livelihood is assured. So I'm not sure that we want a trust model to start with. Maybe eventually we move towards that, because that's the true returning the land back to the commons, ultimately, once we have a social structure in place that supports people from cradle to grave. But I think it still begs the question, though, of where's the money going to come? Where's the capital going to come from to buy the land to start with? And I think the reason that, and there, I think we probably have to decide between going for investors and going for donors, even though there's ways to push both of those labels in more inclusive directions. We have to decide between the Joey's friends nebulous possibility, and the foundations and private donors fundraising side of things. And maybe there's some way in a cooperative that I don't know, that both of those types of people could be members, or maybe it's donor members, or I don't know. I guess I'm
Yeah,
still maybe stuck in the nonprofit model, but
yeah, there's ways to invest in co-ops. You can get investors. Yeah,
right.
there's a whole structure set up for that.
And maybe can you also make charitable donations to the same co-op so you can get
No.
investors?
No, because they're not charitable. You'd need to go to a charity that would be able to receive investments, and then the relationship between you and the charity is the thing that needs to be worked out. And what I'm saying is that the new CRA changes may very well act in our benefit. It's a big game changer. About 2 years ago, the process started with 49 charitable lawyers who came to the government and said, what you're doing is just not okay. It's what you're doing and saying that you have to direct and control. It has to be your project, you direct and control, is completely against reconciliation, where we want Indigenous people to direct and control their own, and we donate to them. Completely against, like, the years that I was in with Oxfam, where our relationship with developing countries was we wanted them to direct and control their projects. We expected them to. And we were always getting in legal trouble. So this particular thing has just happened. It's just rolling out right now. We had the first, and I will send you the record, the recording when I get it. This was just a few days ago. So I'm thinking that there's some way that now foundations feel free to do this. Well, let's say Victoria Foundation would feel free to take this on, and that they could get the donations through them, and they could receipt those donations to the donor, and then that would go towards the purchase of land. Or I don't know how it's going to work because it's so brand new, but I mean, I think it's a good thing for us to pursue.
I'm going to say that's over to me.
Yeah.
I want to respond, Heather, to your, first of all, to my aspirations. I'm always very skeptical of possessive pronouns, and I do realize that I bring a lot of ideas, and I have been thinking aspirationally. I've been thinking radically, actually, because I've been trying to go further and further down the chain to, where does the problem actually start, and how do we, sort of. But I think, Becca, so your earlier comment about it's not so much a legal question as a financial one, about people who are going to put the money up have questions, and what are the questions that we need to be able to answer. So I think that's really the key of, what are the kind, and I think this is why we've had to go, Becca's question of, are we looking for investors, or are we looking for donors? And part of the challenge is, as we walk down either of those roads, there are some, in the way things are currently structured, you hit a wall pretty quick, right? Because donors aren't going to like the fact that it's run like a business. Like that it's, the people are, that's the whole question of, like, farmland can't be charitable, that you get in, when you go the donor route, all of a sudden you have these restrictions on how you can use the land and how you can organize yourself and stuff. But when you go the investor route, you get expectations that we don't want to encourage. And so I think that, and I'm dittoing, I think, Becca's, I too feel like where the land, how do I want to say this? If we can form an entity that is legally allowed to find people with the resources and aligned vision to purchase land and bring it into a legal structure, at some point in the future, that entity could donate or sell its land to a trust or somebody else. And like you're saying, Heather, the foundations have a way of, writing the agreement. So we give the land, but we still have a 100-year lease on the land or something like that.
Can I say that this happened in Nova Scotia? There was a
we-
cooperative that purchased the land, and then they actually became a trust.
Hmm.
And so, and I think that they probably donated their shares to the trust, but I could certainly find out. We have lots of examples other than BC of people doing things that we can't seem to do in BC, mainly because I think of the agricultural land reserve has itself kind of legal restrictions and things on land.
Mm,
And, you know,
Yeah.
so we do have some precedences for some of this that you're talking about to happen. I mean,
Well, and I think so, yeah. So, and I'm noticing that we are at the end of our time, our scheduled time, and I think it's probably, I'm going to propose that the best use of our time right now is to go once around and to try to have what's your takeaway, or where are you landing? Either what's your question, or what's your takeaway, or where do you think we are at the moment? Because I think we need to put a bow on it and then come back to it. I feel like this is very rich and productive, and I feel like we're getting very close to something, but I don't know that we're going to get to the product in the next, reasonable time frame. So, and same rules apply. You can always pass and we'll come back to you. And does that, first of all, thumbs up, does that seem reasonable at this point? Okay, then over to you, Roland. Where are you landing at the moment?
I'm actually going to pass because I am not feeling the shape of where we're going. I may just need to listen more. So I'm going to pass to Heather.
I'm feeling a little like hyperventilating because I think that there's a whole lot of things that I could maybe take on, but I have to be careful about committing myself to it. And if I do take them on, do I have the information? Like if I did get a hold of Elvie, what am I going to say to him? I feel like I'm ready to form a community service co-op. I have the confidence that we can disband it if I have the confidence, if we have the confidence in the group of people, we can disband it if we want to. We can change our constitution if we want to. So to me, it's about identifying the people we know are aligned enough, good enough for us to go ahead, constitute it, and then have some legal entity that we can present to people. Whether that's to go to a foundation, a trust, a donor, a grantor, or whatever. Right now, we aren't legally anything. So that's what I'm taking away. And
I'm still confused about where to go with the lawyers and whether we have enough clarity yet to go to, could we go to them and say, we've identified these 3 things that are our highest priorities, or this one thing or 2 things, whatever, and can you help us figure out the best simple starting structure? Like, as a community service, will a community services cooperative enable us to buy the land and ensure that the people who are stewarding it get to have their needs met and freedom to change the structure in the future? Like, maybe those are the 3 things. because I feel like, although I totally am intrigued, and Heather, with your knowledge of things, I also think it might be good to have somebody who knows all the different possible structures before we totally pick. And then, you know, we could say we're leaning towards a cooperative. Anyway, that's where I'm landing. To the extent that it's a landing, I'm not sure it's a landing. That's where I'm floating.
Mhm.
Over to Ben.
I'm landing with, I think we need a diagram. I think that Heather's point too of, well, your point, Becca, and Heather's point of, you know, if you were going to go to LV, or if we're going to go talk to the lawyers, how do we say, you know, A plus B and C, you know, like it needs to do this, this, and this, and have some overly simplistic, but, you know, a schematic. You know, it ignores some of the details, but it shows the, like, here are the core factors. And I feel like that's close, actually. Yeah, so, and I've always said, you know, I don't think the legal structures matter that much, you know, and likewise the bylaws, I think I was talking with somebody the other day, and I said, if your culture's messed up, the bylaws aren't going to save you, and if your culture's good, you're never going to look at your bylaws, you know. So it's
That's
sort of
totally
like,
true. It's totally true.
yeah, it really is. It's just you want to be, mostly it's an insurance protection. Like, if things go wrong, if there is problems with the alignment, if there's problems with our ability to communicate well, then your bylaws and everything are the backup, and that's when the lawyers get involved. And hopefully, and then actually, and by that point, you're lost. You know what I mean? Like, as soon as you have to revert to your bylaws, it's pretty hopeless. It's an overstatement, but I think, yeah, my takeaway is, can we make a simple graphic of what seems to be the core without worrying about is it a co-op, or is it, you know, it's like, this entity does this, this entity does this, and or whatever, this part does this and this part does that. Are they the same thing, or are they different things? Yeah. Yeah.
You see, can I just say that I don't know if this is the final round.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's pass over to Roland, and then we can come back for a final round.
I'm enjoying auditing. Over to Heather.
I'm just thinking that in response to what Becca said, we can do anything we want except for the financial. The question is, what do the financial people who are going to give us $500,000 need?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
the only question I have. Because all the rest of it is us creating what we think will work. And like you say, Ben, it's like, first of all, I don't believe in getting lawyers in until we know what we want to do, and then to say, like, how do we do this legally? And I think that because we are doing something that hasn't been done before, they're not going to know.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any more experience than Ben has with structures. They just know the law. End of that.
So back over to you, Becca.
I mean, I agree that you don't need the bylaws unless you have problems, but we probably also need it for the investors and donors. And so,
Right. Yeah.
um, and we probably can't have everything we want. Like, I think that's what the message from the lawyers is we're getting, is like that beautiful combination of all the different, things that you put together wouldn't hold water in a court of law because it's mixing too many different things. Now, do we want to be the test case for it because it's really way cool? Maybe, but maybe not until we have the land. So I still think we need to figure out what the structure is that people are buying into, for them to buy into it. And it doesn't feel like we're on the same page about meeting with the lawyers. So that we're probably not going to invite them to our next meeting. I think we should do a final round on checking about that.
Yeah, I'm in the same position as last meeting of, I think we could pull something together by the next meeting, but that didn't happen the last time. And we're still not there yet. At this point, where we are right now, I don't think it makes sense to talk to the lawyers again. I think we still need to, we aren't on the same page. We still have questions. And I think it's also, I mean, I think we are all gun shy about how expensive it is to just talk to the lawyers. And if we can talk to LV, if we can talk to other contacts and get the same kind of feedback, or get as much feedback as we can for free, that helps us get it to the point where, ultimately I want to be able to do what you're saying, Becca, is like hand it to the lawyers and say, here's what we think we're doing with this. Will this work? And they can say yes or no. But it feels to me like we want it as close to done as possible. And actually, the other thing too, I haven't reread the Articles of Incorporation, but to tell you the truth, if we were seeking only people who wanted to have a footprint, if we separate out bridge financing, somebody short term who might put things together to allow us the time to get all of the other investors involved, but where we were only going for investors who were timeshare croppers, insurance policy wannabes, or farmer caretakers, people who were going to try to earn sweat equity. What's in it for me is really clear, right? It's not a big sell. The only thing that I think we're having a hard time selling is the people who are only interested in it as a bridge financing mechanism.
That's correct.
Yeah. So
by insurance wannabes, you mean like people who might need to escape the US, or who might need to have a place to grow food if the whole economy crashes? Okay.
Exactly. And I think it's also people who, even if you're not wanting to escape, that you're wanting to have a role in playing a role. I want to get rid of the insurance policy because it's kind of pejorative, but it's like thinking about some people have different resources available, and we all need to figure out how to work together. I'm going to end on that. I read an article a week or two ago about that was this neo-Darwinians about what we need to do to address climate change. And it reconfirmed all the things that I am really concerned about, which is my timeline now. I don't try to talk about timelines because they're very iffy, but looking at all of the different people that are putting together climate timelines and environmental timelines and oil timelines and social timelines, we don't have much time before things are going to go really, really south. So like by 2040, we need to have some robust systems in place. And that's, 15 years from now. And those systems are going to take 10 years to bring online. You know, if we just started working, right, if we had the resources and the time and the people, and we started working right now, it's still going to take us years to figure this out. And I feel like we're dicking around trying to convince people that your real estate investment's okay. You know, like that you're going to make a profit off of your, you know, whatever money. I'm like, we're going to offer you a solid source of food. And that's going to be more valuable than, you know, your 5% a year over 10 years profit, you know. But anyhow, I think the thing for me is if we really got the people who were saying, yes, I realize there's urgency. Yes, it is a good investment to be thinking about how we sustain ourselves through turbulent times. All the rest of that, we don't need anybody. That's easy. All, you know, getting those people, some people who have the material resources, some people have the knowledge, some people who have the energy, and we bring them together and we're all in this together and we're all working on the same thing. Easy sneezy, no problem. It's just this bridge financing question. Anyhow, I will get off of my soapbox. Over to you,
And
Alon.
I'm going to leave because I've got 20 minutes to get food ready for 4 people. So have a good week, everyone. Maybe if you can talk about, we've talked about trying to have a conversation, continuing the conversation between meetings. If anyway, that is my question. Is that even possible? So I'm going to go before anyone says anything because I want to hear it, but I'm going to go. Bye.
So then I definitely, if it's a conversation between you and I to get some more clarity, I'm definitely open to doing that. Not to keep you out of the loop.
Please keep me out of the loop because I have at least one trip and possibly two in the next 2 weeks. So
But
well, I think what I really have been wanting, I thought I would get it done by now, but it's been taking too long for the little pieces and parts to come together. But I want to make the diagram. And so what I'm going to try to do is commit to putting at least some rough thing together of diagramming the simple version of this. And, you know, just like the lawyers offered us one and we've seen a couple others, and I just want to do something like that that says one part does this and one part does this, and here are the investors and blah, blah, blah. And then that'll give us maybe something more definitive to react to.
Okay.
So that'll be my I don't know how long it will take me. I think I can do it in the next short period of time, days.
yeah, and I'd like to challenge you, as I do with myself and everybody, is to get to a place where it's good enough for now,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because I think we're not there yet, but when we're looking at trying to include everything, we get away from, hey, this is good enough for right now. And
Yeah.
and think about the core of who you have confidence in right now.
Mhm.
Like, you know what I mean? So that whether or
Yeah.
not they have money or not, this is who's going to see that the culture of that we are promoting is going to continue.
Yeah. All right. Are we at wrap up?
We are at wrap
Yeah,
up.
I'll just also say that one of my trips might put me on the road during our next meeting, but I might be able to phone in from the car.
Okay.
We'll welcome you.
Yep. And we can
Wherever you
always it is good to have stability, and we can also be flexible too. So, you know, generally moving the time or moving the day, not that big a deal.
Yeah. Okay.
All righty. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Exciting to see where this is going to go.
It is. Let's just move it. Let's do
move it. Let's do this already.
Let's
Okay.
do it. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.